Here at Gillette Stadium after the Patriots have beaten the New York Giants 28-20 in the preseason finale. I'm Mike Petraglia, joined as always by Patriots expert columnist Christopher Price. Chris, what did you think, first of all, of Tim Tebow's performance? 2 touchdown passes, he was sacked 4 times, but at the end of this game, he seemed to make a big statement, especially to Quentin Sims.
I think it was interesting. First of all, you look at his numbers, and the box score really doesn't tell the whole story when you're talking about Tebow. He did not get much support from his offensive line, I will say that. So when you look at the numbers, you kind of have to take them with a little bit of a grain of salt. 2 touchdown passes to Quentin Sims, I love that connection. Every single pass of consequence that Tim Tebow made this summer, he made to Quentin Sims. And it's really kind of sweet almost to look at the relationship between the two, because Sims talked about him as this, oh, I can't believe it, it's Tim Tebow, but it's kind of a fun, unique relationship that the two would have. I think that Tebow was going to make the roster even before what happened tonight. Again, 6 for 11, 91 yards, 2 touchdown passes, 4 sacks. He was going to make the roster because you can't look at Tebow as a short-term answer. You're looking at Tebow as a long-term project, and I think they're more than willing to give up a roster spot for someone like him. I will say this too. I wouldn't be surprised if Tim Tebow comes up with a injury clause between now and Saturday that lands him on IR for the year, because I think they want him around, and I think they're going to try and keep him around in any form or fashion, and that will entail coming up with a FOXBORO fleet.
Something that really stuck out to me and a lot of other observers was the reaction on the Patriots sideline, led by Ryan Mallett of all people, when Tebow threw the 2 touchdown passes. And what Mallett said after the game was that everybody in the world was pulling for him, and it was really something really special to see. And something Mallett also pointed to was he noticed, and so did his teammates, all the bluebirds raining down on Tebow, and then how Tebow responded. How important do you think that is?
I think that's nice to see, and I think it's nice to see a player respond to a setback with a positive. I think that shows mental toughness, and I think that's nice to see. It's also nice to see, not that this matters in the long term really, but to see the entire sideline pull him. I think that was a nice sign, and I think that might translate into something down the road. Again, I don't think that's necessarily going to win him a roster spot, but that's the kind of thing that doesn't go unnoticed.
Well, I think, speaking of Ryan Mallett, we saw exactly what he's capable of. You will not see a better pass, Tom Brady will not, than the one Ryan Mallett threw to Josh Boyce for the touchdown, 40 yards in the first half. What did you think of Ryan Mallett, and should we have confidence, God forbid Tom Brady go down at any point during the season, that Ryan Mallett would step in and get the job done?
It was a very Ryan Mallett first half, in that he showed off maybe one of the strongest arms in the NFL with that 40-yard pass to Boyce. Just a phenomenal pass, phenomenal catch by Boyce, just perfect execution on both sides. He also missed 2, at least by my count, short passes, including one to Leon Washington, a wide-open Leon Washington, where he didn't show enough touching the ball. So you really have to look at Ryan Mallett for 2 sides of the coin here, because you're looking at the guy, again, who has phenomenal arm strength, one of the best in the league when it comes to that. But at the same time, you're looking at a guy who struggles with consistency. And I think that right now, he's still the number 2 on this team. Going forward, I don't know, but I think those kinds of throws, the 40-yard pass to Boyce, the touchdown pass to Boyce there, those are the kind of throws that continue to intrigue the rest of the NFL. And you start to think, maybe he could bring you, at least a third down the road. He's not going to be traded now, but I think down the road, those are the kind of passes that we should remember when his name comes up in trade talks again next time the draft.
No surprise, Tom Brady did not play in this game. He does not have to worry about his spot on the 53-man roster come 6 p.m. Saturday night. But what about some of the other players who did play? How do you read the tea leaves, starting with someone like an Adrian Wilson?
That was really interesting to see. I saw the Adrian Wilson situation. There's some similarities there to what he's going through now and what John Lynch did back in 2008. He played deep into that preseason finale, and you started to think, well, maybe he's not too long for this world. And so I don't know if he's going to follow the same path. I know that Adrian Wilson wants to continue to play, whether it's here or somewhere else. But he's definitely a guy that is going to bear watching when cuts come on Saturday. It was interesting to see Daniel Fells out there, and Jake Ballard, and Leon Washington. Some of those veterans were out there in the 4th quarter, late into the game, when some of the rookies were cooling their heels on the sideline. It's interesting to see the contrast. So I don't think that bodes well for all of them. I wouldn't be surprised to see at least one of them cut, but I don't know about all of them.
one of the questions I asked several Patriots players after this game, including Leon Washington, was what is going to go through your mind in the next 48 hours, less than 48 hours after the conclusion of this game. Leon Washington told me, I have 3 boys at home. I am not worried about the future of my football career. I'm very blessed. I'm very happy. I asked Tim Tebow the same question. But in terms of the hours leading up to the 6 p.m. deadline on Saturday, who, even among the veterans, should be concerned?
You know, I think that group that we just talked about, Adrian Wilson, Daniel Fells, Leon Washington, the rest of them in that group, I think that you could make a case to keep several of them around. I think you could also make a pretty good case to cut at least one of them. I think that there's some guys in that group, including Daniel Fells, and I've heard this a couple of times now, he could be one of those Deion Branch type situations where he's cut and then is re-signed a week or 2 into the regular season, kind of save you some money, you know, give you a little bit of roster flexibility in that regard too. So I think you look at that group of veterans, I think that not all of those guys are ultimately going to end up making this 53-man roster.
Something we should also point out, obviously, a guy like Quentin Sims catches 2 touchdown passes. Likely could be cut, but also is one of those guys who has practice squad eligibility, and there's going to be over 1,000 players on that waiver wire at 6 p.m. as a lot of teams try to get players through the waiver wire and back onto their practice squad. What do you think about that potential with the Patriots in the fall?
I think there's some really interesting guys. There are really some really interesting practice squad possibilities with this team. You talk about Quentin Sims, you talk about Michael Buchanan, the 7th round pick with 2.5 sacks tonight. I think he would be very difficult to get from the practice squad. There's a handful of other guys in this roster. Steve O'Harness, another 7th round pick who really reminds me in a lot of ways of Tracy White. I don't think that they could get him through their practice squad. These are all guys that they want to keep around, but again, I don't know in the long term, what that entails, whether they try and get them through the practice squad, whether they end up putting them on season-ending IR, whether they end up keeping them on the 53-man roster. With a lot of guys really in that situation for rolling the dice.
And one big roster spot could be Rob Gronkowski. Chris, point blank, does he start the season on PUP and miss the first 6 games of the year, or is he active after 6 p.m. Saturday?
I think he's active. I don't think he's going to be the Rob Gronkowski that we've all come to know over the last couple of years. I think that they've activated him, and they're essentially going to play with a 52-man roster, because that puts the fear of God in the minds of opposing defensive coordinators from Orchard Park to Flowery Branch, that you have to start thinking about the possibility of Rob Gronkowski being out there on the field. Now, again, he is not going to be Rob Gronkowski for the first 6 to 8 weeks of the season. That's just a physical impossibility given what he's gone through, the trauma that his body has undergone. Anytime you have 5 surgeries over the course of an offseason, it's impossible to bounce back that quickly. That being said, the impression that he's going to be out there will give defensive coordinators pause and have to make them game plan for the possibility of Gronkowski being out there. Even if it's 1, 2, 3 hours a week, it's still time spent doing that as opposed to time that you should be doing something else.
All right, that is a wrap for the 2013 Patriots preseason. They finished 3-1. Obviously, the several hours leading up to the deadline on Saturday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time will be very, very interesting, to say the least, for these Patriots. We'll keep you posted. Be sure to follow along at WEEI.com and the Patriots page at WEEI.com. For Christopher Price, I'm Mike Petraglia, WEEI.com.